From the Toronto Star, I'm Reggie Wilner, and this matters. Hi, I'm Reggie Wilner, host of This Matters. It's April 1st, and Major League Baseball and spring have officially started. We are bringing you a special episode today, simulcasting the launch of Deep Left Field, a new baseball podcast from the Toronto Star featuring longtime Blue Jays radio voice Mike Wilner. This is our first pitch, so let's play ball. And we hope you'll enjoy and subscribe to Deep Left Field, wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us out here in Deep Left Field. I'm Mike Wilner. This is the Toronto Star's Blue Jays podcast, and this is our official launch for Opening Day 2021. As the Blue Jays begin a 162-game season. Last year, only 60. They made the playoffs, going 32-28, but an expanded playoff field, and they were the 8th seed, even though they had the 7th best record. This year is going to be completely different. They will play at least 100 more games than they played last year, and the playoff field is cut from 8 to 5 in the American League, so they've got their work cut out for them. But again, it says here that they should be a favorite to claim one of those postseason spots. Either way, it's going to be a fun ride, and we are thrilled to have you along with us, enjoying it every step of the way out here in Deep Left Field. We've got a heck of a show for you. On our launch, we'll talk to Paul Sun-Hyung Lee, the star of Kim's Convenience, and amazingly, a Canadian kid who's a member of the Star Wars universe. He's been in The Mandalorian. Alyson Footer of MLB.com will join us. She's a national writer for them, but covered the Houston Astros for a very long time and saw George Springer when he was just in the zygotic phase of his professional career. So she'll give us some insight into what the Blue Jays can expect from Springer, who is going to start the season on the injured list, which for me is a good thing. George Springer has a grade 2 oblique strain, and everything we've heard from the Blue Jays says that he's pushing to play. He doesn't feel it. They didn't even know he was hurt until they took an MRI. They didn't know how badly he was hurt. He says it doesn't feel that bad. And I really got the feeling that he was going to try to force his way into the lineup on opening day, hurt himself worse, and miss a couple of months. So he starts the season on the injured list. He'll miss at least that first road trip through New York and Texas, and then they'll reevaluate and see if he can play for their virtual home opener or their first home opener, which will be in Dunedin. The Blue Jays are going to have 3 home openers this year, one in Dunedin, one in Buffalo, and one in Toronto. We hope. I really do believe that they will be back in Toronto by August at the latest, if not at the All-Star break. As far as Blue Jays news coming up on opening day, Robbie Ray will be on the injured list as well, which means he's out for that first road trip. Of course, Nate Pearson is going to be on the injured list as he deals with his groin strain. And it looks like the Blue Jays are going to open the season, instead of Ryu, Pearson, Ray against the Yankees, it's going to be Ryu, Ross Stripling, and TJ Zoik, which doesn't really fill the Yankees with all that much dread. But look, we know that the Blue Jays are going to have to win a lot of games 9-7 this year. And why not start early? It's going to be tough against Garrett Cole on opening day, but those bats for the long run are going to stand the Blue Jays in very good stead, even without George Springer to start the season. And again, bold prediction, Blue Jays lead the American League in runs scored this year, and I don't really think that that's going out on too much of a limb. This is Deep Left Field, the Toronto Star's Blue Jays baseball podcast. I'm Mike Wilner, and I'm so happy to have you along on our official launch episode. And to officially launch, why not the Canadian kid who's going to be a force in the Blue Jays bullpen this year, 6 2/3 spring innings and 15 strikeouts. It's Jordan Romano. So he's not going to be the closer, but he's probably going to get the biggest outs late in games. Jordan Romano, the pride and joy of Markham, Ontario, joins us out here in Deep Left Field. Jordan, thanks for doing this, and Happy New Year.
Thanks for having me on. And Thanks for having me as your first guest. I feel honored.
No, the honor is mine. Believe me, it's been such a pleasure watching you come up through the system and watching you finally get to the big leagues and become a crazy good back end reliever. I love having you, and I like too that when the first time I met you. There was like a smile, a little recognition, because you're a Toronto kid, and it's great that you grew up as a Toronto kid watching this team, and I'm assuming occasionally listening to me on the radio once or twice.
Yeah, funny you say that, actually. I think growing up, so I'd play baseball, right? And after our baseball games, I'm pretty sure me and my dad on the way home would listen to your radio show. Was it like a Jays talk?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, we'd always have that on. So we'd be listening pretty much every day. It was after our practices and games. And I think we actually tried to call in a few times, but we never got through.
Oh man, that would have been amazing. I can imagine what we would. You would have been someone who actually made some good points, I think, on that show. And there weren't always that many of those people on the program. I have to ask you because first of all, let's go back to the beginning. After you got Rule 5, you came back to the Jays. I've heard you talk about looking back on your rookie season as a disappointment. And I remember your rookie season as that first call-up in June, you were opening eyes, impressing the hell out of people, blowing everybody away, and you got hurt. And you came back and you were hurt. But in the rearview mirror, now that it's a couple of years back, do you see it any differently, or do you still look at it and say, "Man, I wasn't very good"? Because I don't see it that way at all.
Yeah, you know what? So when I first came up in June there of 19, I thought I pitched pretty well. I was throwing hard, doing my thing out there. But after I got hurt, when I came back up, I just didn't feel the same. I was giving up a few more walks, a few more hits than I'd like to do. So it wasn't, it wasn't a total disaster, but I knew I could be better, So, and that was a turning point. It's like, okay, I could kind of keep doing the same thing and be mediocre in the big leagues, or I could, change a few things and really be able to dominate. So I just went about things a little bit differently, worked on the mental game a little bit more because, when you're pitching in front of 50,000 people, it's a little bit different than when you're pitching in AAA. So you have to keep it sharp up there to control the moment. But looking back on it, I'm glad I did what I did in 2019 because it got me to where I'm at now.
And it is amazing. So many people say that third deck makes so much of a difference. When you're pitching in a ballpark that has a third deck in it, it's a completely different game.
Yeah, definitely. And, in AAA, the crowds aren't as big and you really can't prepare for it until you're kind of thrown out there. But yeah, like you said, it is a little bit different, that third deck. It gets loud there pretty late in games. So that's just something over time, you just learn to deal with it. And yeah, once you deal with the crowds and stuff, it's just, business as usual.
With Jordan Romano and, last year, in all the weirdness and the no traveling and calling games off of TV monitors, we got a different look at you, like those of us who were broadcasting the games, because we had a dedicated camera on each team's bullpen for every game. And, you're here and you're smiling and you're loose and you're comfortable and it's great. But watching you, like as soon as the game moved to the fifth inning, you're standing up. You're starting to stalk around in the bullpen. You're throwing a couple of pitches or doing a couple of towel drills. But it's like we can see that energy is there and beginning to focus. And all of a sudden, you're like locked in Jordan rather than, just taking it easy, normal Jordan. Is that part of that like mental game that you said you had to change going into last year?
Yeah, exactly. So in 19, I was always pretty loose in the bullpen, joking around, talking a lot. And then it's like, your name gets called and you try to lock it in pretty quickly to go out there and do your job. But I just felt like I could be doing a better job of locking it in and making sure I'm ready, for the moment. So this past year, like you said, once the fifth inning kind of comes along, I don't really want to talk to anyone. I just want to kind of start focusing in, just seeing how the game's planning out, seeing maybe, which batters I'm going to face, and just really locking in on just my job to do that night. So yeah, once the fifth inning hits, I'm kind of all business. I have one job to do, and I'm going to get as prepared as I can to do that job.
And last year, you were called on any point in time from the sixth inning on to get what Charlie Montoyo figured were going to be the biggest outs, the highest leverage outs over the course of your season until you hurt the finger. Does getting started that early help you for whenever that phone rings? Whether it's going to be like the phone could ring for you in the sixth inning, it could not ring for you until the eighth. How do you sort of make sure that you don't peak too soon, for lack of a better term?
Yeah. So I think, last year, I think I pitched in the sixth inning, maybe once or twice, but I feel like if I'm locked in the fifth inning, even if I am going in like sixth, seventh inning, that does still gives me enough time to, lock it in and make sure everything's, in order. So that's going to be the same thing this year. I talked with them, and, they're going to be asking me to get big outs from the sixth to the ninth. So I'm going to stick with the same routine. Kind of once that fifth inning rolls around, I tie up my cleats real tight, and then it's business.
Kirby Yates was brought in to be the closer. His elbow blew, unfortunately, and he'll miss the season. But I was impressed that afterwards you said, when people said, okay, so do you want to be the closer now? Because we figure everybody wants to be the closer, everybody in the bullpen. And you said, no, I'm fine getting the huge outs wherever they need the huge outs. Is it not something where you're like, yeah, if I can get 45 saves, I'd love to get 45 saves?
Yeah. I kind of, being in the bullpen, everyone does want to close games. And, this season I do want to close games. But, it's whenever they need me to be. We have in our bullpen a lot of guys that can close games. So whoever Charlie calls on in the ninth, eighth, we'll all be ready for it. So, I expect to have, some saves this year. But I also expect to be pitching in the sixth, seventh, eighth as well. So just whatever they throw at me, I'll be ready for it.
We were making some bold predictions on the last sneak peek episode of the podcast. And I said at least 5 of you are going to get 3 saves or more this year. I could see you, Dolis, Chatwood, Phelps, Tim Meza getting 3 saves each. And, you can maybe even throw Merriweather and Baraki in there. It seems like it's a really talented bullpen.
Yeah, I feel like this bullpen, especially in last year too, a lot of guys here, everyone has the stuff to close. So I kind of agree with that prediction, and it's if Dolis has gone, back to back, maybe they'll ask me to close, and say if I've gone back to back, it could be a guy like Meza, Chatwood, Phelps. I think we're all capable of doing it. So it'll just be, who's ever ready to go that day.
I know you didn't get to watch every game like you would in a normal spring because of the protocols this year, but I don't love talking about spring numbers, but Meza didn't give up a hit all spring. Chatwood gave up 1 hit until his last outing. Phelps gave up 2 hits all spring. This is some serious stuff.
Oh yeah. Like I was saying before, all the guys in the bullpen, super talented. And I feel like that's kind of maybe an underrated part of our team is our bullpen. We're kind of unassuming, but we have a lot of talent there. Veteran guys like Chatwood and Phelps, they've been doing it a long time, and they're really good at what they do. And adding a guy like Tim Meza, he was hurt, long road to recovery, but he's hungry to go now, and he's looking great.
And as far as spring numbers, you look at strikeouts per 9. Yours were over 20 for the spring because you had 15, I think, in 6 2/3 innings. How much are you? How much do you get from a spring when you're just blowing people away on a relatively regular basis?
Well, it still feels good to strike out hitters, no matter where it is, no matter what league you're playing in. It always feels good to strike out hitters. But like you said, they're spring numbers. But I was just happy to see, my fastball's in a good place. Sliders moving it how I wanted. So it's not so much the strikeouts for me. It's just kind of what my stuff's doing. And I was pretty happy with it all spring.
I want you to put your analyst hat on for a second, because there's one more spring number that I want to talk to you about, and it's from one of your hitters, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. He had, 42, 43 plate appearances in the spring. He struck out 5 times. And to me, that spring training numbers don't matter, but spring training process does. And when you're striking out 5 times in a month, to me, that's pretty significant.
Yeah, definitely. It is spring training, but like with Vladdy, he's still facing big league pitchers whenever he's going in there, right? And they're not trying to give free passes, free hits away. So, I mean, even though it is spring training, he looks great. I've been playing with him the past couple of years, and I think it's going to be a really big year for him. He looks in great shape, focused, and he's one of the most talented hitters I've ever seen. So I think it's going to be a good year for him.
Does anybody stand out for you among the new guys, the people brought in that you didn't know before, having watched them for 6 weeks?
Yeah, I think one of my favorites is Matt's. His stuff, whenever I watch him pitch, I'm so impressed with it. He's a lefty, mid-90s, and he's got 4+ pitches, in my opinion, and he's looked great this spring. So I think it's going to be a really good year for him. I think he's going to surprise a lot of people.
With Jordan Romano, I keep thinking about your finger, because I messed up my finger, and it's still sort of the same pulley tendon thing. But I'm comparing you to George Springer, who we just found out is going to start the season on the injured list. I think that that's a move that the team has to make, almost to protect a player from himself, because I think you would have pitched in the playoffs. You would have pitched in the last week of the season, and it might not have been the best idea. I feel like it's almost the same thing with Springer, that they had to do it to prevent him from talking his way into the lineup.
As baseball players, especially at this level, we're all super competitive, right? We want to be out there. And, last year, I really wanted to pitch during the playoffs, but it probably really wasn't the best thing for me to do medically. So they kind of, told me, hey, it's not right. It's too soon. And that probably was the best decision looking back. And I feel like a lot of players are in the same boat. It's like, we need, the medical staff, our trainers to really give us guidance, because we'll try to play through anything.
You were hurt last year when the Jays made their only trip into Yankee Stadium, and that was not a good 3 games. Jays lost all 3 by a combined 43-15. It was at the worst point in the season, but then 2 days later you're clinching a playoff spot. You're starting this season in Yankee Stadium. The Yankees, even though they didn't win the division last year, are the favorites in the division this year. Is there anything to let's either A, put those beatings behind us, or 2, win a couple of games so that we're not even thinking about that stuff anymore?
Yeah, you know what? I don't think it's on anyone's mind coming into Yankee Stadium this year. We got a lot of new guys, and I think you can't get caught up in what happened last year. You just got to focus on this year. So, coming into Yankee Stadium, they're a good team, but we're really good too. So we're not focused on last year. We're just ready to win this year.
Jordan Romano, the first Canadian to pick up a win for the Blue Jays on opening day. But before you did that last year, before I let you go, I just have to ask what it means to you as a GTA kid to be part of, this next, hopefully, great Blue Jays team. This is a team that we believe is set up to be very good for a very long time. And what does it mean to you that you're wearing that maple leaf every day and raising the profile of baseball, getting all these kids involved in the game now because the team's going to be so good, just like the wave we had after '93 and after 2015.
Yeah, it's really special to me, and it's something I don't take lightly and I don't take for granted. As a kid, this is what I wanted to do, and just looking back, maybe even like 15 years ago, if you said, I was going to be on the Blue Jays opening day and we're going to be at Yankee Stadium, that'd be just such a dream come true. So It's also cool for me. Like kids growing up in the GTA now, they say like, "Hey, that guy's from Markham." He played for teams that we play all the time. I play for the Markham Mariners, so it's like, hey, if he can do it, why can't I? So that's pretty special to me, and it's something I really think about every day.
Okay, I got to ask you one more thing. I said that was going to be the last question, but you're such a calm and a nice guy, and you have been since the very beginning. How do you come up with all that horrible stuff that you say to yourself in the baseball when you're on the mound now? Where are you drawing that darkness from?
Yeah, it's something I do. I think for me to be really good at what I do, I need to get maybe a little dark. I can't be the same as I'm just, walking around, and non-game days, I'm pretty light, easygoing. But when I'm on that mound, I need to really go to a place that's different for me to be really, really good.
As long as you leave it there and with great success. And we wish you nothing but the best and tremendous success. And thank you so much for being the first guest on the launch of this Deep Left Field podcast.
Hey, no problem. I'm excited to listen to some more episodes.
Yeah. All right, man. Thank you so much. It's a big honor for me to have you so excited to do this. I appreciate it so much.
Yeah, no problem. That was fun.
That's Jordan Romano, who will probably be the highest leverage reliever for the Blue Jays this season, though maybe not the closer. He might get some big outs in the 7th. We talked about that in the 8th. But I'll still bet he leads the team in saves. We shall see. And what an incredible, first of all, that he thought about calling into my radio show. Amazing. That would have been a lot of fun. But very cool to hear from Jordan. Again, the pride of Markham, Ontario. And it is great to see a guy who takes such pride in wearing that maple leaf, playing such a prominent role for the Toronto Blue Jays. We are going to step away for a second. When we come back, we've got Alyson Footer of MLB.com. She covered the Houston Astros for a long time. She's got some great insight into George Springer. And then we'll hear from the star of Kim's Convenience, a huge Blue Jays fan, Paul Sun-Hyung Lee. That's all coming up out here in Deep Left Field. Alyson, I invited you on because, for a couple of reasons. First of all, you're a phenomenal reporter and you know a lot of things. But second of all, because I'm a big sentimental dope. And when I started covering the Jays full-time on the road, you were my first guest. And I don't know if you remember, but I think we spent like 45 minutes together during a rain delay in Detroit in the first week of the 2013 season. So thank you so much for that 8 years later.
Oh, that was fun. I do remember it very well because we had just started this awards program at MLB.com, and I was going around the country and giving out these awards that fans voted on in front offices. That was my very first stop, and I ended up sitting in the rain delay with you, and you gave me so much publicity on these awards. My employers were thrilled. I'm like, I literally just sat on the radio with Blue Jays radio and talked about our awards. So I owe you one.
No problem. Anytime. That was back when we all knew 4 games into 2013, the Blue Jays are sending out Edgar Gonzalez on the mound, who we nicknamed the King of Slop. We knew things were not going to go as well for that team as we anticipated. But you're in Houston, so I want to talk to you specifically about the Blue Jays' new guy. He's going to start the season on the injured list with a strained oblique. But George Springer was the most sought-after free agent the entire offseason. He gets the biggest contract the Blue Jays have ever given out. And while I know you're a national reporter for MLB.com, you've still seen this guy from day one. And I remember in Kissimmee in the spring how much people were talking about this kid from the very, very beginning. So tell us your impressions over his career of the newest Blue Jay.
Yeah, George was the symbol of the Astros getting out of that 3-year disastrous rut where they were losing 100+ games every year. So they drafted him in 2011, and they knew they nailed it. I was actually in the draft room when they picked him. and the room just erupted. It's the team before. It's when they make their pick, and you're holding your breath. And then they knew that they got their guy. And I had been in the draft room in previous years. I had never seen that kind of excitement before, so I knew that this guy was pretty special. And so when he came up in 2014, it was the sign that they're starting to work out of this, and the plan is there, and they have the nucleus in mind. And he's probably one of the most dynamic players, just all around athletes that I've seen with the Astros. So physical and athletic. Defensively, he made some unbelievable catches, over the wall catches. In fact, he had to be told early on when he was really young to kind of tone it down to save his body, because he would just run into any wall. But unbelievable leadoff man, the power, the strength. People don't remember in 2016, the Astros actually started off the season like 7-17, something just terrible. They moved him up to the leadoff spot, and they were never bad again. I mean, without exaggeration, they started winning, and then, the rest is history. So the personality, just beloved by his teammates, just really the all-around package is probably one of the best that I've ever seen.
Was the hill still there in center when he started? Was he taking on that hill at Minute Maid, or had they gotten rid of it by then?
He was a lot in right field. So no, the hill went away. I mean, he was there for the first couple of years with the hill. I don't remember exactly when they took it out. I do not miss that thing at all. I was one of the happiest people when they took it out, but yeah, he might have overlapped with it. I don't remember the exact timing.
He was a World Series MVP in 2017. I have talked many times, both on the radio and in this new gig, about, referring to the 17 Astros as dirty, dirty cheaters a lot. And yeah, he had better numbers in 19 and 20 than he did in 17, which I think speaks very highly of him. But obviously there's a bit of a taint to that year. But through the playoffs, whether they were cheating in the playoffs or not, I think they were. That was still one of the most unbelievable World Series that there's ever been, that 17 with the Dodgers. And that experience isn't tainted. The fact that he played in those games still means something, whether they were legit or not. The pressure and the tension was absolutely legit.
Yeah. And, I don't know what was going on in the playoffs. I'm fairly certain that trash can banging thing wasn't happening at Dodger Stadium. I mean, that's a noisy place. There's speculation that there was something going on. I don't excuse them from anything, and I really don't give them the benefit of the doubt, because they really don't deserve the benefit of the doubt. But I do think that there's probably somewhere, you've got like Dodgers fans that are positive they were doing this, and Astros fans are positive they weren't. It's probably somewhere in the middle. But I will say that, yes, I'm fairly certain that in 2019, things are pretty legit. And his talent level is legit. So there was really nothing nefarious going on in those years leading up to 2017. And he was an unbelievable player, and the power and the strength that he has when he gets his timing down, he's so dynamic. And I think that he deserves a lot of credit for the overall body of work, and not so much the lunacy of this ridiculous scheme that they concocted. And just as a side note, I mean, some of the people I've talked to that were in the weeds, that were directly involved, were disgusted at the fact that they were doing this in games against the Mariners when they were beating them by 13, 14 runs, 6, 7, whatever it was. Like, do we really need to be doing this? And I think that was part of what was kind of pathetic about the whole thing. But I think if you look at the individual I personally think that the Astros would have won it anyway in 17. We'll never know. But that was a pretty talented team.
That's the saddest part, is that we'll never know. As much as they can say,
Right.
It didn't help. And I remember doing a game at Minute Maid in 17 where they scored, I think, 6 runs in the bottom of the 9th against the Blue Jays, and Juan Centeno drove in the winning run. And Anyway, I had 2 more things. We're with Alyson Footer of MLB.com, and the clock's not our friend right here. But first of all, you talked about how when Springer was moved up to the leadoff spot, he flourished, team flourished, all that great stuff. I have advocated many times, and will continue to do so, that the best place for George Springer to hit in this Blue Jays lineup is second, because they have someone else who you're very familiar with, in Kevin Biggio, who has these elite on-base skills. And, last year, once they moved him to the leadoff spot, 390 on base. He's got a better career on base than Springer, but only by 1 point. But I don't love I mean, with the Astros, it was different because you're followed by everything, and the Blue Jays have a big backing too. But I love this idea of making sure that there's not one at bat in every game where you're guaranteeing George Springer will come up with nobody on base.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're looking at, Cavan is a lot younger. I mean, we don't know where George will now go when they say, the other side of 30. They're still so young. But that is absolutely, because you're still going to get a significant amount of at-bats being in the 2-hole. And certainly if you've got a guy that can get on base as much as Cavan can, and then you get George coming up, and then you just keep going down the line. It's just when you start having no holes in your lineup, and that was the luxury that the Astros had, that there was no way to get around anybody for those few years. So a little different, but I wouldn't say Springer only profiles as like the leadoff guy and you can't put him in. I think that as his career continues, and he's going to have to be in different places, and that might be a time to start now.
Yeah, and Cavan, for those people out there who love the whole stolen base speed leadoff guy, Cavan Biggio's never been thrown out trying to steal a base in his major league career. I think he's 20-0 over his first 2 seasons. Last thing for you, he knows how to pick his spots. He's not a burner, right? But he knows when to go. Last thing for you, you're a national reporter, so up here, we always want to know what people think of us. The Blue Jays aren't in a position yet where there's no holes in the lineup, but they're kind of close. What's the view of the Blue Jays south of the border?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you that I covered a handful of Blue Jays games last year, and I think I noticed what everybody else did, and that's that the base running was not very good. The defense, there were a lot of lapses. These are things that can be worked on. Like, you can't make somebody more talented as a hitter. I mean, they can progress, but like the basic talent is going to be there. Those are things that just are sometimes growing pains. Sometimes you need more experience. I thought these guys are on the cusp. I mean, the pitching is still going to be a question. I mean, the rotation, there are definitely question marks around that rotation. But I saw a team that was young and talented and undeterred by the fact that, yes, they were right in the middle of that pennant race all through September, and they just seemed to be really enjoying themselves. I covered a crushing loss toward the end of that season. I don't remember exactly what the circumstances were, but I remember thinking this could really, really crush them. And they bounced back, and they had a nice ending to the season. So I'm rooting for him. Yes, I'm totally biased because I've known Cavan Biggio since he was 2. I fully admit that. But I think that they can that's the toughest division in baseball. And I think the Blue Jays they have something really special going. And I think we could see some good things this year. That's
perfect. That's exactly what, and those games you covered must have been part of the 43-15 over 3 games that they lost at Yankee Stadium the last week of the season. Alyson, thank you so much for this. We'll be keeping an eye on your work, and I really appreciate you coming back 8 years later to be on the first show again.
I appreciate you having me on. This means a lot to me to be part of that sentimental look back. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, that was Alyson Footer of MLB.com, and she is a wonderful, and really, again, because I'm a big old softie, I had to have Alyson on the first episode, the launch episode of Deep Left Field, because of our history and because she was my first live guest when I started to do ball games on the road back in 2013. On the road is now over for the time being, but there will be baseball, and the launch episode brings you out here into Deep Left Field on opening day, and we are absolutely thrilled to be joined by big Blue Jays fan, big TV star, a member of the Star Wars universe. Paul Sun-Hyung Lee is with us. You know him, you love him, the star of Kim's Convenience. He's been in The Mandalorian, and he comes on this podcast, even though it's audio only, wearing the Blue Jays cap. It is so great to have you here, Paul. Thank you so much for doing it.
Thank you for I'm so honored. I had no idea this was your inaugural podcast. And
it's a big launch.
Yeah, what an honor to be considered for that. Thank you so much.
It is because you are you, and you're a wonderful baseball fan. Maybe a You're a wonderful baseball fan, maybe a little bit impatient with underperforming players, but you love this game and you love this team. And I know a lot of people who only know you from Kim's might be a little bit surprised to hear you speaking without the accent.
Yeah.
But you grew up right in the heart of downtown, and you grew up loving this baseball team, no?
Yeah, I grew up in Calgary, of all places. Yeah, you didn't know I was a Western
What about
kid.
that convenience store on College on off of College Street?
So that convenience store off of College Street, actually, my parents had a convenience store. It was on Sherbourne and Wellesley, just south of Wellesley. And it was called Shea Lee, and we lived above it. And this was before I was even in school. No, it was before I was even in school, because I wasn't going to school. And so we had it there. But then my parents moved out west in 77 for the oil boom in Calgary. And so we ended up staying out there for a number of years until I graduated from high school and then came to University of Toronto to finish, to start my university career. And I've been in Toronto ever since. But I mean, in terms of being a Jays fan, that came a little bit later in life. Like I wasn't watching for the great collapse when they were they lost ground in those 7 games, that final heartbreaking. I'm glad I wasn't, but hey, I'm a Leafs fan, so I've been through enough already, like all that heartache already. So like I get it.
I don't know what the Leafs have done in our lifetimes that compares to that last week of 1987.
Oh, come on. That series against Boston in Game 7 when they're up 4-1 going
that
into
was
the
10
third.
minutes of hockey.
10
We're
minutes
talking about a week in 1987.
I died.
A whole week when
I
they
think
didn't win
the
a game.
entire fan base died 1,000 deaths in that 10 minutes because it was so sudden and so brutal, right? So I guess, the agony of seeing a team slowly, and you think, oh, well, the next game it'll be okay, and the next, and the next. Mm-hmm. But the immediacy of just having your heart ripped out and still beating as you at least this was a slow death, and you steel yourself for that possibility. But so for the Jays, I mean, really, I grew up in Calgary. They had a AAA or the Pacific Coast League team called the Calgary Cannons.
Yep.
And they played at a Foothill Stadium, and I loved it because friends and I would always go beyond the outfield fence, and we'd go hunting for practice balls that they would hit out of the park. And we'd always come back with at least a dozen or so. And these were like just the rattiest balls in the world, right? That's why they're used for batting practice. But when you're a kid, you don't care because they're like baseballs. I like really, really became a Blue Jays fan once I came to Toronto, and just sort of, the Sky Dome was just opening up, and the Jays were breaking attendance records. It was like 4 million fans, tickets sold a year, and that was unheard of in Major League Baseball. And it was easy to get caught up with it. And of course, the big playoff runs and the back-to-back championships in 92, 93. And then from then on, I was like totally hooked, just because by that point too, I think 94, the Expos left, and then it was Canada's only team.
94 was that strike year where the Expos were 74-40. They hung around as a corpse for a while, but but I mean, you came back to Toronto at the right time. That's for sure. Oh, yeah. Because 89, 91, 92, 93, those were the building and then the glory years. So who were your favorites back then? I mean, is it the obvious, the Carter Alomars and Devos, or is there somebody else who held a special place in your heart?
I've always been a fan of catchers. So Pat Borders was the guy for me, and then the vet back there as well. Oh my God, Ernie.
Sure, Ernie Witt.
Yeah, Ernie Witt.
Yeah,
as well. I love the pitchers too. Like I loved, seeing them when they made the runs and got the big names, the big arms to come in. It was great. Jack Morris coming in, David Cohn, Jimmy Key as well, and then the homegrown talent too, like Dave Stieb, obviously, and watching the talent develop with Pat Henkin coming up the ranks, and obviously with Roy, and it was really, really sort of a great time to be learning about baseball too, because it's easy. It's like the 15 Jays, right? I noticed a huge shift in the playgrounds, because before then, all the kids were playing soccer. But once they went on that playoff run, the soccer balls went away and the baseball gloves came out and the bats came out, and every kid was playing baseball. And I know I live in East York. That's our community. the East York Baseball Association exploded. Like the House League, they doubled in size and basically had a waiting list and had to turn kids away because they had so much interest in it. And that cohort sort of moved along. And so like they've got a really strong sort of class starting from 2015 onwards. And that's wonderful to see, especially in a city that's had a major league team for this long, to see baseball really like on a community and developmental level progress that way too. And all the different neighborhoods too. It's not only East York baseball, there's Leaside, there's, North York. It's really cool to see that too. So as a fan of the sport, it's really, really nice to see that grassroots movement take hold and to see fruit bearing from it too. Because it'd be nice to see some more Canadian superstars out there.
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons for that boom of Canadian superstars that saw like Justin Morneau win an MVP and, Joey Votto, Jason Bay was a rookie of the year. Those, Russell Martin, those were from the boom from 85 to 93.
That's right.
When everyone was getting into baseball way more. And then we had some mediocre seasons there with baseball.
It was lean, I have to admit too, because I had friends who worked at Skydome, and I'm always going to call it Skydome, in the ticketing department, and they couldn't give tickets away, it seemed. And there was a time where, and that was when Roy was in his prime too, and that was heartbreaking. But we could roll up and get tickets on the third baseline, and we'd be 10 rows back, having not paid a cent for these tickets. And then we could just walk up and it was the third base coach, Butterfield.
Butterfield.
Yeah, like just he was great with the fans. Just would just chat, and it was just like, so when he left as well, I remember when Farrell went and he took Butterfield with him. It's like, because he was like such a great sort of coach, but he was great with the fans as well in that part. And that's it was interesting too, like watching a team go through a really tough rebuild as well, go from the highs of a championship to the lows of a rebuild. And then the redesigned unis, which I didn't really like as much. But then coming back again and like, it was hard to believe it'd been 22 years since the Jays were last in a playoff series, right? So
yeah, not if you saw every one of those games for 22 years. It wasn't.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
Yeah. I think we are with Paul Sun-Hyung Lee out here in deep left field. I've got to get my head around, saying, as opposed to, you're on deep left field. We're in deep left field.
That's right.
Here on this podcast, and talking about his Blue Jays memories, and as we run up on another season, after last year, the pandemic, which is still not over, quite obviously, but baseball at least seems to be returning to normal. But last year in the 60-game season that started in late July and was super weird, the Blue Jays made the playoffs. Mm-hmm. And that, helped that surge that started in 2015 for the people who were able to pay attention. Now, going into 162 games off of that 60-game year, what are you looking for from this team? What are you expecting from them? Are you going to go back more serious October baseball in your mind?
I think that's the goal. I think right now, with the moves that they're making right now, with the decisions, like, for example, like with Alejandro Kirk making the team, right? They want to field the best team right now. They're not as concerned about the future. Like, if they were sort of hedging their bets, they'd keep them down, season them a little bit more in the minors and whatnot. But it looks like they're in, like, let's make a run at it now mode. And that's exciting as a fan to see, to field the best team and to make those upgrades. Obviously, it's like in any sort of season, you want that consistency there. You want the hitters to hit to average and to exceed that even. Depth, injuries. I mean, we're already been decimated by injuries, and the season hasn't even started yet, right? And so it's all about that. Even in the ISO league that we play, that simulated league. Like if you have one or two key injuries and you don't have the depth players to fill up, like that leaves a gaping hole in your lineup, and you need everybody to sort of step up and fill those gaps, but that doesn't always happen. So you need to be prepared and have a deep bench and guys on the same page. That's what I loved about last year's team. Like, everyone was talking about how the Blue Jays, because they spent all that time together at Skydome, just working,
In summer camp.
Yeah. And they really, you could see that chemistry and they were really pulling for each other, which is great. And so if they can do that, and I'm reading about and I'm hearing reports of the same thing where it is that full team mentality where the new players come in and they're made to feel welcome and part of the group right away. The additions of Springer and Simeon, I think is great, and how they've been accepted and how they're not trying to change the room to fit them either. They're sussing out what the energy in the room is, and they're going to add to it in their own way. But it's not like they're coming in putting down a flag and say this is how it's going to be run from now on. They're very cognizant of that, and I think that bodes really, really well, because when you have a team that's pulling for each other and having fun while they're playing, that's when really magical things start to happen. And they push each other that way too. I like that little rivalries where it's like, I got a hit. You're going to get hit. Let's go. Let's keep this train going type thing. And holding each other accountable as well. So there aren't the lazy plays, the little good enough plays, like where it's full out hustle each time. I think the leadership is there, and not just from the veterans, I think from the younger players too. Right. So.
Yeah. And I think it's really, the best thing to see when a player not so much makes a mistake. These guys are going to make mistakes, whatever. But when a player doesn't run out a ground ball, a healthy player doesn't run out a ground ball, or a guy sort of like just kind of jogs after a ball in the corner or something. What I love to see is not the manager going over to him, but one of the other players. Absolutely. Right? Because that means so much more. And I do think they have that accountability from within, absolutely, on this team. And also, you talk about the cohesiveness. I thought it was really important that George Springer and Ross Stripling had a conversation right off the top, right? Springer was one of the dirty cheaters in the 2017 Astros that beat Stripling's Dodgers, and the two of them cleared the air immediately, which I think is great and absolutely had to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a responsible thing to do. You know what? That's the adult thing to do. I mean, let's face it, right? If you're going to be working with somebody and there is that pass, you need to address it right away. And I love that they didn't share it. That's between them. Whatever sort of closure they got from it, it's between them. All anybody else needs to know is it's cool. And so because then that becomes a distraction too, right? Like people, if a story stinks and nobody believes it, everybody wants to start scratching or digging. But if it's a unified sort of like, nope, it's not a problem, and to continue on like professionals and teammates, there's no story. And that's smart. I think that's super smart. So kudos to them.
One thing I got to ask you before I let you go, Paul Sun-Hyung Lee, growing up a Blue Jays fan, I'm not asking you to speak for the entire Korean community, but what does it mean to you that the leader of this, the Blue Jays bring in Hyunjin Ryu? You've got a Korean at the front of the starting rotation. I know I love seeing representation for my little minority wherever I can. Yeah. What about you?
It means so much. And for him to be willing to come here and to embrace the team, come to another country. I mean, the States is one thing, coming to Canada, but we have a big, strong Korean community here in Toronto as well. And in Canada itself, because the Blue Jays aren't just Toronto's team, it's Canada's team too. It means a lot. And for younger kids, I know for myself, had I seen a Korean ball player who was the ace of the staff, I think I would have been a little bit more charged about pursuing a baseball career perhaps, or wanting to be more engaged in the Little League. And so, he becomes a symbol for inspiration for the next generation, and a champion for a community that rarely sees themselves reflected, especially in their home team. So I think it's wonderful. I love seeing him. I love the way he goes about his business. He's a great example for the Korean community, and we're super proud. I'm super proud to have him on the Blue Jays, and I got to run out and get a jersey now.
Yeah, you got to get a 99.
That's right.
Up there. You know what? I planned to have you for 8 minutes. I think I had you for 18. So thank you so much.
No worries.
I love this conversation. I'm so glad that you and I have gotten to know each other over the last few years. And I will. I'm going to make you come back on this.
I will come back for sure. For sure. Just ask.
All right. That's Paul Sun-Hyung Lee, the star of Kim's Convenience, and he's in the Star Wars universe and The Mandalorian, and a wonderful Blue Jays fan. Love having him on, and he said he'll come on anytime, and you know what? I'm going to bring him on anytime. That was a fantastic conversation, and I can see Paul becoming a regular guest out here with us in Deep Left Field, especially because having gotten to know him, he is, as I mentioned earlier, a very impatient baseball fan. We played in a simulation league and in a few tournaments over the course of the last year, playing what I refer to as Geek League Baseball. He had Willie Mays on his team, and Willie Mays went 1 for 30, and he sent him down. So I definitely want to talk to a guy who's willing to shuffle Willie Mays off to the minor leagues during the heat of a baseball season when the ups and downs and the roller coaster is going. Because remember, and I have to remind people of this all the time, a team that wins 90 games in a baseball season is a playoff team. But to win 90 games in a season, you can go 5-4 in every 9 games. So you're losing every other day. And it can wear on a fan base for sure. And you're still going to win 90 and you're still going to be in the playoffs. When a baseball team feels like it's winning every day, like nobody's like the 2015 Blue Jays were in August and September when they literally barely lost. I think they went something like 41-13. But when you have a 108 win team, let's say, which almost never happens, that team's still losing 1 out of every 3 days. And again, those things are easy to overreact to, believe me, having taken post-game phone calls for 20 years. Anyway, Paul Lee, awesome, and we will have him on plenty on this show, and really appreciated talking to him. Jordan Romano was incredible off the top, and he's going to be getting some big outs for the Blue Jays. He's going to be, I think, for the Blue Jays this year, what Andrew Miller was for Cleveland back in 2016. You never know when you're going to see him, and he might get you 4 or 5 outs, and they're all going to be huge at big points in time in the game. He might only get 15 saves, but he may be the difference. You look at his WPA at the end of the year, win probability added, Jordan Romano is going to be right up there, maybe even the top of the entire pitching staff. And of course, Alyson Footer of MLB.com, awesome. Thrilled to have her along. Thrilled to have all of you along in our official launch. And I have to say, even before we officially launched this podcast, we were the #1 baseball podcast in Canada, and I have you to thank for that. So thank you for subscribing. Thank you for rating and reviewing. Thank you for helping build awareness of this thing. I am brand new at it, and I'm so happy to have all of you along. Tell your friends, as the great Mike Birbiglia says, tell your enemies, tell whoever will listen to join us out here in Deep Left Field. Our producers are JP Fozo and Sean Pattenton. This is the Toronto Star's Blue Jays podcast. So thank you very much to the Toronto Star for helping us put all this together. But again, most of all, thanks to you. We'll see you out here every Thursday in Deep Left Field.